Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the continuation of Courageous Conversations, Black in the C-Suite, hosted by our president, Dr. Helene Gale. My name is Princess India Dandu Young, and I am a faith-walking rising junior majoring in economics with a minor in management and organization here at Spelman College. I'm currently a member of the Entrepreneurship Club and a Sloan Scholar, and I'm also proud to say that I'm a member of the 2023 Goldman Sachs Market Madness team, which just took home the top prize of $1 million in funding for Spelman College. I'm so excited about today's conversation because I'm passionate about entrepreneurship and making a positive impact in the world. In fact, as a self proclaimed serial entrepreneur, I started my own business at the age of 19, which generated $40,000 in revenue in its first 2 years. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of welcoming you all to today's Courageous Conversation, a unique opportunity to engage with and learn from Black women in leadership to ensure that their stories are highlighted. I'm honored to introduce our president, Dr. Helene Gale, and our distinguished guest, Ms. Cathy Hughes, founder and CEO of Urban One Incorporated. We'll hear more about Ms. Hughes' background and herself soon, and I look forward to hearing her words of wisdom during today's program. In addition, I'm grateful to Dr. Gale for giving us the opportunity to hear such life-changing stories of success and lessons learned. Dr. Gale is a world-renowned public health and nonprofit leader and physician with deep experience in STEM, economic development, humanitarianism, and health equity. And we're fortunate to have her here as our leader and president at Spelman College. By the way, Dr. Gale, congratulations on your recent inauguration. Now, without further ado, please join me in a virtual applause to welcome Spelman College President Dr. Helene Gale and Urban One Incorporated founder and chairwoman, Ms. Cathy Hughes.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that welcome and introduction, Princess. And as all of you have just heard, among her many accomplishments, Princess was one of our students who competed in the 2023 Goldman Sachs Market Madness competition several weeks ago. I had the opportunity to talk to her and the other team. They were the winning team, other teammates. They were the winning team. They took the top prize of $1 million grant for Spelman College. And to have these incredible, bright young women bring home that kind of funding and resources for Spelman so that other students, along with themselves, can continue this education and to have some of the financial resources that make such a difference. It just makes me so proud. And just thank you and to your team for all you do. You are just another example of our outstanding scholars. Welcome to all of you who joined us virtually for this final episode of Courageous Conversations, Black in the C-Suite for this academic year. Special thanks always to our sponsors, UPS, for your continued support of our series. Your support of the college helps us continue to share and to elevate these very important conversations. UPS is such an important sponsor for us, and want to also just say thanks to Nikki Clifton, who was part of the inauguration event, and all of the ways in which you partner with us. And to our very, very special guest today, thank you, Cathy Hughes, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. As the founder and chairwoman of Urban One, Cathy is nothing short of a legend. She is a dynamic media pioneer who demonstrates the power of one woman, one vision, one company, Urban One. So in so many ways, you are a first and a number one, and it goes along with your brand. Her unprecedented career has spawned a multimedia conglomerate that generates original content across the spectrum of radio, television, digital media. Urban One, formerly known as Radio One, is the largest African American owned diversified media corporation in the nation. It reaches more than 80% of the African American market through its subsidiaries, Radio One, 55 broadcast radio stations within that brand, TV One and Clio TV, two cable television networks, Reach Media Incorporated, and digital platforms. I don't even know if I knew about all these different brands. Urban One is one solution across platform marketing company. You can read her full bio on our website on the Courageous Conversation pages. Fascinating life journey. So again, welcome, Cathy, and thank you so much. I think we'll just transition into question and answer. So let me just start maybe a little bit from the beginning. You have accomplished so much, astronomically so, I guess. Perhaps you can start just by sharing when and where it all began. Why did you choose broadcasting as a career? What were some of the things that were your inspiration and models that really helped you think about this as a way to move things forward?
Well, number one, first of all, Dr. Gail, this is such an incredible honor for me to be with you and all the good folks at Spelman. This is my first time being able to share some time with Spelman. I've been invited many times. It just never, ever seemed to work out over the years. And so I'm particularly honored that I am with you today. I have been fascinated with who you are and the incredible work. Many years ago, was touched by Billy Avery and have really kind of kept up with things because of Billy Avery coming on. At that time, I hosted a morning show. And she was the first person that put it on my heart and in my mind the disparity that exists when we talk about people of color. I didn't realize that, quite frankly. It was not something that I'm certain that I'm not unique with that because of Billy. So many individuals, particularly those of you who are in the medical field, really had to say she's absolutely correct. And we need to band together and do something to change it. And so many years ago, I became aware of the incredible work that you've been involved with. So again, I thank you for this great opportunity. My interest in media, I say, is kind of like medicine in terms of you don't really choose it, it chooses you, or you're not able to withstand the rigors that are required of you to progress and make a difference in these two disciplines. I was 8 years old. I was growing up in Omaha, Nebraska. I was an expert on Conway Twitty and all of the country and Western stars, as they were called at that time, had never heard Black radio, had never heard a Black person on the radio, did not realize when my mother bought me a transistor radio at age 8 that I was listening to white air personalities who were imitating what they thought was being soulful, what they thought was how talking jive, as they called it that time, because they didn't allow Black people on radio during those days. And I was fascinated. Some of the most serious punishment I endured as a child was because I'm growing up in public housing because my father is a full-time college student at Creighton University. My mother had transitioned from a very successful career in music that didn't generate any revenue into nursing. And we're in the projects and one bathroom, 6 of us in the house. But I had to do my morning show every morning with my toothbrush was my microphone and my mirror was my audience. And I didn't care that my brothers and sister, everybody would punch me. My mother would punish me. It did not matter because I was not unlocking the bathroom door until I did the very last part of my broadcast every morning. And so finally, the only reason I think that we ultimately ended up with a different arrangement on bathrooms was because nobody got to get ready for work or school until Cathy, got out of the bathroom during her morning show. I wanted to be a change agent. I wanted to bring information that I felt was important because even before I turned 10 years old, I realized that this void existed in terms of Black information, in terms of Black air personalities, in terms of opportunities. And so media actually chose me with this transistor radio. And I knew then, I feel that I was very blessed by God. And I share this with young people all the time. Sometimes, even before we even reach puberty, before when we're still in elementary school, sometimes it was interesting to hear Princess's background and ideas. Sometimes we already know at a very early age what God has destined us to be and to do. But I grew up in a generation where parents and elders had a lot of influence on what you chose to do in life. One of the things I love about this younger generation now is they choose for themselves what it is that they want to do. They don't go to college to get a good job. They go to college to master a skill set so that they can be successful in whatever it is that they decide to do. But it was different in my generation. And I insisted, I mean, I had notes sent home from the nuns. I was in a Catholic school system saying that I talked too much. Ultimately, I ended up supporting myself and building a business off running my mouth. Okay. And we listened to, my mother listened to the nuns, I would have been silenced. So often I say to young people, if it's something that you really love, doesn't matter. You can be 5 years old. You can be 8 years old, 10 years old. If it's something that really excites you and you look forward to doing each and every day, that's probably the career that you should follow.
So, from singing and talking into the mirror with your toothbrush, quite a road to where you are today. Could you just take us a bit down that path, and what were some of the steps? How did you start kind of bringing that tangible sense of entrepreneurship and, starting with one business and moving to where you are today? What was kind of that path, and how did you think about um, knowing that you? When did it first kind of come to you that you wanted to own, be in control, move this forward, be in the C-suite from where you started in your original idea that broadcast was probably what you were meant to do?
Well, again, as I said, I didn't care. It's interesting. I'm often asked about my greatest challenges. My greatest challenge was staying alive, coming out of that bathroom every morning after I held everyone up from getting ready for work or school. The thing that I've always known about my personality was I like to be in charge. And the most comfortable way of being in charge is to work for yourself. Because when you're working for someone else, they're in charge and they decide what, in fact, is going to, transpire in your career and in your life. I created a format that literally changed urban radio throughout the world, first in the United States, and then it spread to Europe, and from Europe to Africa. It's called The Quiet Storm. But because I worked for someone else at that time, it was very controversial because Howard University had protests against my quiet storm. The students and some of the faculty members felt that I had removed jazz. Well, my mother had been a very accomplished jazz musician, and it's great to be a jazz musician, but even today, very few of them get paid what their true worth is, what their true value is. And so I wanted something that was commercially viable. Here I had a radio station owned by Howard University that the Howard students weren't listening to because we were doing 360 degrees of blackness, it was called, but basically it was 99% jazz. So I needed to create something that would attract the students first and foremost, give them an opportunity to learn about the communications industry. And it, over a very short 18-month to 3-year period, became the #1 format in America. There are still stations today who call themselves the Quiet Storm.
Yeah.
And I
It's
never
what I grew up on.
Exactly. And so I never wanted to be in a position again where God would bless me with a $1 trillion baby because I tried to get Howard to license it. They refused to because, as I said, at the same time, I'm trying to convince Howard that we have been blessed with this format called The Quiet Storm. There were people protesting, carrying signs saying, take this bubblegum music off the airways. And so I never wanted ever to be in a position where I could not control my own professional destiny. Main reason I went into business at that time, I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. We have a boarding school in Mississippi, the Piney Woods Country Life School in Mississippi, that is now 115 years old, that was started by my grandfather. Entrepreneurs throughout my entire ancestry story. My great grandmother was second in command to excuse me, to Frederick Douglass on the speaking circuit, and it literally ran her own freedom trail, and took her 11 children to freedom out of slavery, and did it as an entrepreneur, married to a craftsman, an African craftsman, and they built ironworks for fireplaces. So when you have generational entrepreneurs, very much like what Princess has shared with me in her history, when you grow up with it, you just really realize that you are better suited working for yourself than you are working for anyone. And I had shared with her earlier before you joined us, Dr. Gail, one of the things that COVID brought about was the reality to so many individuals of all ages, but particularly to young people, that they no longer had to get a quote good job, that they could create a good job for themselves and create it for other individuals. And so often it was something as simple as baking a sweet potato pie that gets into Walmart, something as simple as braiding hair that develops a whole hair care line, that these things that has historically been considered hobbies or something that you like to do were actually entrepreneurial opportunities in disguise. And I was very blessed to recognize that in an early age. Then I was blessed by someone who has, again, a Spelman connection, Terry Jones, who had a program, excuse me, a venture capital company, and a program to assist African Americans, Black and Brown people, to get into the communications industry. Terry was on the Spelman board for like 11 years. His wife, Marcella Jones, started the first parent association for Spelman. All three of their daughters, Spelman graduates, doing incredible things. The oldest one, an incredible entrepreneur. And he loaned me $1 million. And when you look at that, almost 50 years ago, for a Black man to loan a Black woman $1 million, almost a half a century ago, to open a business. He's also was the funding source for BET. A lot of people do not realize that both BET and Urban One both were funded through a Black company, a Black venture capital company, Syndicated Communications. That's pretty significant as we talk about helping each other, as we talk about reinvesting in ourselves and in our community. I'm a classic example of that. And so Terry had watched me. He was very familiar with the Quiet Storm. It was quite interesting because I had worked for other individuals. I had worked for Howard University. I had been both on the faculty and the staff at Howard. And so I go to pitch him to allow me to own my first radio station. And he says, so let's talk about your business plan. And I looked at him very sincerely and very naively, said, my plan is to succeed in business. And after he finished laughing at me, he said, that's not quite what a business plan is. You don't know how to do a business plan. And I said, yeah, I plan to succeed. He said, no, let me get you some assistance. And so he not only loaned me, he was not only responsible for me securing my first $1 million loan, but he also was responsible for me. And then later my son, really understanding what it takes to be an entrepreneur in today's climate and environment.
So that leads me to a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. One, you often use the phrase unapologetically Black, and you just talked about how having Black capital to support you and to initiate you made such a difference. Could you say a bit about how you've used that, sense of unapologetically Black and what that has meant to you and to how you have conducted your business?
Well, like I said, my family's been unapologetically Black for a very, very long time. My great great grandmother did her own Underground Railroad, and then Harriet Tubman and her became co-hearts. She was basically second in command with Harriet Tubman. But we have always felt our family has a mantra that in order to do well, you must first do good for other individuals. We believe
Mm-hmm.
that, we practice that. It's not about what I can achieve for myself as an entrepreneur. It's about what I can achieve for other individuals. How many children can I help educate? How many opportunities can I provide for other individuals? One of the things that I'm quite proud of that we do on all of our outlets, we're five major companies that we reach 80% of all African, actually 82% of all African Americans touch one of the five companies that are our primary focus in our corporation. We do Buy Black Tuesdays. There are a lot of individuals who, number one, don't understand the importance of advertising and marketing, but number two, can't afford it. And God has blessed us. We're almost 45 years old in business now. And so we've generated a lot of revenue over the years from selling. And I just think that you have an obligation, if you really are in the Black people business, to give back. It's not a one-way street. And it really is biblically true that the more you give, the more you shall receive. And so every Tuesday, in every one of our markets throughout the country, and our information kind of needs to be updated because we're no longer at 55 radio stations. We're up to 70 at this point. Each one of those in 18 different markets, we give away commercials. We push for a week, 3 identified businesses, and sometimes they're national businesses. We've tried to identify them on a criteria. These are businesses that most Black folks don't know even exist. And to be able to have an impact, not for the benefit of them being able to afford to buy spots, but a benefit from them being able to afford to hire people to help them whatever their business venture is. I see my obligation being unapologetically in the Black people business, not just in terms of what we do in terms of commercials, but also the positions that we take. There are certain things, there are certain advertisers that we won't touch with a 10-foot pole. Now, people will say, well, you're in business. That's foolish. You should take business from anyone, willing to do business with you. I don't agree with that. I think that as an entrepreneur, that I have an obligation to be socially conscious with how I make my money. It's just not about making the money. And that over the years has been very controversial with individuals, including Terry Jones, who loaned me, their first $1 million, because Terry was like, you can't be boycotting the Washington Post. Okay, and I did. He was not in favor of that demonstration that I launched against the Washington Post, but I felt that the Washington Post was doing damage to the Washington, D.C. Black community in how they portrayed us in Washington, D.C. And so I led a boycott of their Sunday magazine for some 13 weeks. And when they opened their new magazine, had some 113 pages of advertising. When we finally called off the boycott, they were down to 13 pages. We had removed practically their entire marketing because the people who were advertising, that was quite costly. And certainly they tried to portray us as doing it in order to make money. There was no money involved. I lost lots and lots and lots of money and was bumping heads with the same people who had put me in business. But I feel that I have an obligation not only to be of assistance financially, but also to be an example of what being woke really means, what social consciousness really means. And if media doesn't take a position, if media doesn't stand for what's right, we are influencers. Media is the ultimate influencer, particularly when you're talking about communities of color. Then do you think the oppressor is going to tell, okay, the oppressed how to seek freedom? No, it is my obligation. And like I said, sometimes it takes us longer to get to the point that we're trying to get to, but we always get there. And when we get there, we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, we did it without having to sacrifice our Blackness.
So, it's one of these questions that I think businesses face all the time: when to take a stand on something, and when is it not necessarily the best thing to do? How do you think about taking on social issues? And of course, your reality radio series uh, focuses a lot on social issues, and that's one thing as programming. But then there's the broader the company taking on social issues. How do you think about that, and when do you decide which issues you feel it's important for you as a company, not any of your particular programs, but you as a company to take on a social issue?
Well, it's more difficult now because one of the blessings that I've, had in my career is I was the first African American woman to chair a publicly held corporation. So it's different when you have to strategically maneuver yourself around Wall Street. There's no book that tells you, it's really an individual, is how you feel about being a person of color. It's your conscience. There is no set formula for you should take this position or that position. I have dealt with, I have never been very religious, even though I grew up through a Catholic educational system all the way through Creighton University. Uh, the reality is you have to know when it feels right. You have to know what's right. And one of the benefits of aging is you become more acute in terms of listening to your inner conscious, your that the soul, as it's known in religion. You know when something is right. You know when something. Also, we have always been very research oriented in my company. It's made a big difference because I never wanted to be in a position of telling the Black community what I thought was best for them. I always wanted to be in a position of being of assistance to my community in what they desired to get accomplished, what they knew was right in their soul and in their consciousness. And so there's no set formula. I can't give advice on how do you know, because it's different with each individual person. I knew that for the Washington Post to spend $5 million to revamp a magazine that had on the cover a Black drug dealer having his toenails by his girlfriend, they had fooled us. They had said the cover is going to be a Black cover. So we started promoting it free of charge for the Washington Post. We thought at that time it might have been Cliff Alexander, who, at one time was rumored might run for president of the United States, John Thompson with the champion, Georgetown Hoyas basketball team. We went through this whole long litany of Black accomplished individuals that we knew would grace the cover of the first issue of the Washington Post magazine, and turned out to be a Black drug dealer who, in addition to everything else, didn't even live in DC. He lived in New York and his girlfriend was in DC, and they photographed her cutting his toenails in a magazine with the prestige. And I realized, I was irate. Okay. I was like, why don't you just say bring back slavery? Why don't you just say that Black folks are ignorant and backwards and don't deserve anything in the nation? How dare you insult me and my community like this? So I launched this Take It Back campaign because boycott had already been declared illegal. If you got caught boycotting, calling for a boycott, you could be prosecuted. So we called it a Take It Back campaign. And we bought the newspaper every Sunday, and then we served it back on the front steps of the Washington Post magazine headquarters. We would toss it there. We would keep the paper and toss the magazine back up on the steps. You just have to really know what your moral compass is and what direction it is facing and headed in. And I think that oftentimes it's a hard decision because oftentimes it will cost you. But I do believe that when you do good for someone else, then God does well by you. And so it's like a long-term investment. You know, it may cost you. Uh, it was estimated that I lost about $3 to $4 million leading the Take It Back campaign at a time I could barely service my debt. That's the reason Terry Jones and others were so opposed to me. You can't continue to do this, okay? Find something else to be socially relevant about. But I couldn't let it go. And because of it now, the Washington Post was able to hire Black reporters and editors and put Black people in management, which was not my goal at that time. My goal was just more objective and truthful coverage of my community, of the DC community. But there were all these other byproducts that came along with it. But sometimes, you know, I watch individuals right now. What's popular in the media is it going to be Tyler Perry or Byron Allen who's going to partnership with Viacom to buy part of BET? That's because they want to share in the Black Lives Matter revenue that major corporations have committed. And so do you pass on that opportunity to own part of BET, or do you give Viacom hundreds of millions of dollars to be their partner and deprive the revenue that is destined for Black-owned media? Do you basically slit your own throat for an opportunity to be in business with Viacom and buy part of BET? We were approached and we said unequivocally, no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you over and over again have said, shown examples of standing for your principles. In the end, you know, it's the right thing to do, but it also ends up being good for the business.
Absolutely. Takes
So,
longer,
yeah,
and
takes
sometimes
longer.
very scary along the way. But ultimately, if you do good, you will do well financially.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's such an important lesson, because I think in this day where we think so short term and quarter by quarter, it's so easy to think about the short term and not think about, in the long run, what are you doing this business for? What are you trying to accomplish? Um, Earlier back, you mentioned briefly your son. So let me ask a question about balancing business, the work, motherhood, personal life. You know, it's a question, and we as women get asked it perhaps more than others because we do have so many different roles we play. Could you talk a bit about how you have balanced all of that as you continue to build the business?
Well, Dr. Gail, the main reason I'm so thankful to Terry Jones and Syndicated Communications, I can't tell you how many banks told me no, because number one, I was a woman and I was still in the childbearing, age when, and then they're like, do you plan to have any more children? And I'm like, what does that have to do with me being able to service this loan? It was never a balancing act for me. My son facetiously likes to say that he thought that everybody went to jail to work as kids, that he was held as a captive, almost like being in jail in the radio station, because he came every day after school. He grew up in it. Again, very much like Princess. Princess grew up in a family where her parents were entrepreneurs. Motherhood, my number one priority, my number one blessing. I was a teenage mother. I was impregnated and mother at 17. There's only a 17-year gap between me and my son. And my whole life changed when they put the baby in my arms. I realized for the first time that it wasn't about me. His existence taught me to think outside of myself, and what had been described by my parents, by my teachers, by my community of elders as the biggest mistake I could possibly make. Having this baby became the greatest blessing of my life because it taught me to give. It taught me that most teenagers are self-centered. It's part of how our we're constructed. When you're a teenager, the most important thing is you. You know everything. You want to be about everything. And becoming a mother as a teenager changed my whole perspective. And so to make certain that he didn't become a statistic, he became more important than my career. He became important. At one time when he was struggling, before he realized that getting an MBA from Wharton might change his life and change the future of our company, which it has. He was like, well, I already went to college because my mother took me to college in a baby carriage and I used to sit on the floor while she was in classes. He used to think that that was cute to say why he didn't want to go to college. Okay. And then as he got older, he got wiser and realized that he not only needed to go to college, he needed to go to grad school and really prepare himself for the world of finance and economics. And the issue of the Jones family, Marcella and Terry Jones, their daughters were their top priority. Here they are, highly accomplished individuals, but their priority was focusing. When you focus on being a good parent, again, it's a long-term investment. You want your children to be, so many children now taking longer than 4 years to get out of school, still living at home because of the terrible condition of the economy, the pressures, these student loans. There's so many extenuating circumstances that we're not preparing them for. And so much of it is not just motherhood, but parenting, period. And, you know, it's always been a priority with me. Everything that I did, everything that, you know, the hardest part of this, Dr. Gail, to be honest with you, was turning over the combination to the safe to the same kid who had lost the keys to the front door. The transition, okay, that was the biggest challenge, getting him to that point where he was qualified, he was educated, he was ready to take over the company was a lot easier than me relinquishing power and authority, to be very honest with you. Because like I said, Terry used to crack up at me. Not only did he laugh at me when I told him my plan was to succeed in business, I said, you really want me to put him in charge? Okay, all right. He couldn't stay in charge of the keys to the house. Okay, all right. And he said, you gotta let him make his own mistakes. Now, as he approaches almost 60 years old, it is so rewarding to me to realize that Terry was a counselor. He advised me that I get professional help. The transition of power is very difficult in generational businesses, very difficult. But if you don't transition, you're not going to grow. You're not going to. And a lot of that, again, has to do with motherhood being first with me. I have a lecture that I like to give to my elders, my generation, about when to transition your house over to your children. And most of us transition it in our will when we're dead. The kid already has a house 10 times better, okay? The first thing they're going to do is dispose of it. And that's tragic because that's what's happened to our ownership of land in the United States. At one time, we had 40 million plus acres. Slaves knew, buy land, buy land. But we waited too long to transition. If you've done a good job with motherhood, if you've been a good parent, your child's not going to be trifling and leave you homeless. Okay, so why not give them the house where they could use it as collateral, where they can use the equity in it to build their business or do what they want or finance their education? Very few children want their parents' homes when their parents die.
Exactly.
Okay, but yet that's when most Black folks and brown folks give the house to the next generation. Those are lessons that we have to learn. Those are habits that we must learn to change. We must use that house. And if you've done a good job of parenting, that child's going to always make certain that you have a good, safe roof over your head, that you're going to be warm and wet and well fed. You have to learn to relinquish power and control at a certain point if you're going to grow and go forward in life generationally. Generational businesses, the hardest challenge is transitioning from your authority to their authority.
So true. And kind of keeping in that vein, this is a very different media world than the media world you started out in.
Yes.
So could you say a bit about how you've been able to maintain, share with all of the different platforms, the streaming and other services that didn't exist when you first started? How have you been able to kind of keep up with the trends and continue to keep the kind of market share that you do?
One of the ways is something I mentioned earlier, research. Research is so very important. It is so very important for you to understand your audience. When I first went into business, Dr. Gail, we were competing with other broadcasters. Now we're actually competing with the individuals that we're servicing. Young people have their own playlist. They all think it's kind of like bartending. They think it's easy. Okay. They don't realize that. Okay. But they all think that they all make their own radio stations. And yet I've got to stay alive in the industry of radio and still do things that involve them when the reality is I'm in direct competition with the people that I'm actually in business to serve. That's a complete change. Before, I had to worry about a clear channel that's now known as iHeart. I had to worry about an NBC radio or a CBS. Now I've got to worry about the youngsters who really sometimes have better playlists. But with research, not only do I recognize what they want and what they like and what they need, but also I have the ability to open doors to provide opportunities and to share that which I've already pioneered with them. But you got to be really unafraid of new ideas. You've got to be unafraid. One of the things that bothers me about social awareness, again, my generation, social activism basically started on college campuses. All right. It didn't start by some sisters deciding that they were going to create something called Black Lives Matter. Students were challenged in the classrooms. So much has changed, not just in media, but it's interesting because this whole controversy with Trump, CNN is, I had to smile to myself when Don Lemon was let go. There were a lot of Black folks who posted on social media, boycott CNN. I'm like, you all were already boycotting them. They wouldn't have let Don go if you all hadn't stopped watching his show. Nobody who has high ratings, okay, is let go. So now CNN is advertising a town hall meeting with Donald Trump. Well, if in fact Fox has just been proven, okay, that Fox created the presidency of Donald Trump. And those are the types of decisions that we were not confronted with when I went into the world of media. You wouldn't have a Dan Rather or a Walter Cronkite insulted doing a crime series or doing entertainment. They did hard news. Now it's almost impossible to have hard news without there's this element of, but it's kind of like, are we the horse or are we the cart? Because people follow that which we show them, what we share with them. And why is it that we believe that if we go a different route, why is it that crime is the number one genre on both broadcast television and cable television? Why is reality television so popular with women being disrespectful to each other and doing things that I've never witnessed? And I'm 3/4 of a century old. I've never had that type of association. I've never been in a restaurant or any place and seen women conducting themselves the way they have them conducting in reality television. So does reality television, does the coverage of crime, does this whole fascination with celebrity status and celebrity lifestyles, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do we create the desire to see that? Or are we, in fact, covering that which our viewers and our listeners actually want to see and hear? So, very interesting to live, Dr. Gail, that bothers me because I really would like an answer to that question before I actually retire full time.
Yeah, no, and it's hard. You're in the business of wanting to capture eyeballs and ears, and you want to appeal to the next generation. But I think it does create a real dilemma of, do you play to what they seem to be enjoying today, or do you try to shape the way people think about content? And it is, you're right. It's a very challenging question
yes.
to answer.
Which is changed considerably. Like I said, Walter Cronkite never in his wildest dreams would have considered doing a Dateline.
Right.
Okay, that's what they had the Barbara Walters of the media for. Those entertainment reporters were strictly different than a hardcore journalist. Hardcore journalists were hardcore news, I mean, even Anderson Cooper all over the coronation and, what people were wearing and was Harry on the balcony or not. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not how news and information used to be disseminated.
And so do you have it in order to think about, there's that question, but broadly speaking, how to appeal to the Gen Zers and this next generation? How do you think about keeping yourself fresh and current so that what you are producing does help to position you with this generation?
By opening the door and letting them come in to bring their freshness, bring their new ideas. Like I said, research has a lot to do with opening that door of opportunity. Is an age-old problem. I mean, Charles is just now becoming, the King of England. All right, he should be retiring, not taking on a new role. Okay, his mama stayed to the very end. Okay, I mean, he's an old man. He's an elder. And hopefully he will not do that to William if they continue the monarchy, in Britain. You have to open the door for these young folks. You've got to embrace their ideas. One of the things that we consciously look for with our Black Tuesdays is entrepreneurial ventures that are young people. Entrepreneurial ventures that we know that young people don't have and excuse me, because our mainstream radio stations have for many years we're almost as old as hip hop and rap because it's 50 years old now, and we're almost 45 years old now. You have to really be willing to open the doors for new ideas, fresh blood, as they say, and that's a lot easier said than accomplished, because certainly any corporation wants somebody who's been with them for 25, 30, 40 years. Okay, the institutional history, the understanding of how the company functions and the rest. But at some point, you got to open the door and bring in that 22-year-old just out of college graduate. You got to open that door to those who may not have gone to college, but have on their own self-educated. Now with technology, before you had to go to the library. Sometimes when I talk to classes at Howard about how you had to go to the library and go to the card system and look up the card system that then told you numerically what you were looking for was under. I said, now all you gotta do is push a button and ask the computer, and they do all the, okay. I mean, research used to be 1,000 times more difficult than it is now for the modern day student. And you have to recognize that. You have to recognize that also that young people are moving at a much faster pace. And one of the things that happens with aging, longevity, seniority on a job is that you kind of slow it down as you age yourself. Young people are full of vim and vigor, okay? And the fact with technology, everything is instant.
Right.
And it's a whole different mentality. So how we achieve staying relevant is first and foremost research, but secondly, opening the door of opportunity.
So I'm looking at our time, and I guess the hour has flown by. And if we were doing this in real time, we would have students, our wonderful students, asking their own questions. So maybe I'll ask a question, perhaps on their behalf, which is, if you were giving advice to young people who were thinking about entrepreneurship, what might some of that advice be?
Follow your heart, follow your dream. Sometimes the worst dirt advice that we get comes from the people who love us the most. When I was in a sleeping bag, sleeping on the floor of my radio station, my mother pleaded with me to give up trying to be in radio and go get myself a quote good government job. My mother at 92 years old said to me, that was the worst damn advice I ever gave you, wasn't it? I said, yes, ma'am. I said, but I wasn't going to give it up. And she said, I didn't understand. I say to young people that I think that one of the greatest blessings that God ever bestowed upon me is that I never once thought about not pursuing that which I knew in my heart I wanted to do. And I think that if I had advice to give to my younger self, that advice would be not to ever worry, because worry is almost the doubting of God being there with you and for you in some type of way, no matter what the challenge was, what the opportunity was. I came through it.
Yeah.
Okay. And worrying didn't do anything to change that. Worrying didn't make it better. Okay. Might have made it worse, but I don't know. I just think that you have to say, go for it 100%. And you know when you're at the end of your line, at the end of your rope, you know when you've run out of space. You know when the runway is getting ready to drop off onto a cliff. You know it, you feel it, but pursue it with all the vim and vigor, with your whole heart, your soul, your whole mentality. Make it your number one priority, and you will achieve it. If you believe in yourself, you will achieve whatever it is that you set out to do.
Fabulous. Wonderful way to end an incredible conversation. It has really been my honor to spend this time with you. You have been a shero of mine for many, many years. Thanks for sharing your courageous insights, your journey, and just for continuing to be a real beacon at a time when we need it more than ever. So thank you so much. And it was wonderful to hear about the Spelman connection and how much that has been a part of your life as well. We look forward to having you here on our campus at some point.
Thank you. I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, now that I've established that I'm a big supporter, please invite the campus.
We will. We definitely will. Thank you so much.
I'd be honored. Thank you. And God bless you. And thank you for all you have done, not just in the area of education, but particularly in the area of medical care for our community. God bless you for your efforts and your work.
Thank you. It's been my honor. Have a good week.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Princess.
Thank you.